Channel here on YouTube, where we've got the TNT takes for you on Australian Survivor Heroes versus Villains. I am joined by a brand new guest here on the podcast for the very first time. I found another Kiwi, another New Zealander who watches Survivor. His name is Michael. Michael, how are you doing?
Chris, mate, I'm doing amazing. Thank you so much for having a fellow Kiwi to be part of your amazing podcast, my friend.
I'm so excited. I didn't think there was anybody else in Auckland that watched Survivor. So, when you reached out and said, Chris, I'm a big fan, I've been checking out the podcast. I love Australian Survivor. It's my favorite franchise. And we've been chatting back and forth a little bit. And you said, I really wanted to talk about Australian Survivor and specifically the direction they're going in with this next season being a Heroes versus Villains season. So, now's your opportunity. Let people know. What do you think, as someone that's been a big fan of the show, what do you think of the fact that next season is going to be this Heroes versus Villains season? Initial thoughts about the theme, and also the fact that it's going to be a little bit of a hybrid compared to what we saw in the US.
I think it's great because obviously for every Survivor fan, Heroes versus Villains is the biggest thing possible. Everyone's been wanting like a rematch of it, like who are the new heroes, who are the new villains. And I think with Australian Survivor, something that they really love to do is have these massively themed seasons, something that the audience can really get behind. Are you brain or brawn? Are you champion or contender? Now, are you hero or villain? So I think it's a good idea to bring in such like a massive theme as well, especially with having like Russell and Sandra on. This theme would definitely loop more American viewers to the show. And I think it'll be quite interesting. And I think it's also quite humorous as well that it's a hybrid season with a mix of returning and newbie cast. But it should be quite interesting to know who is a villain in their ordinary day lives. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of bring up a good point here. A lot of us that have been talking about the theme, and we're trying to like let it sink in. My initial thoughts, I was on the other spectrum here. I think we've spoken about it off air, where I'm a little bit lower on it because I feel like when you're taking on a theme like Heroes versus Villains, where this is the biggest theme out there. I mean, Heroes versus Villains is widely regarded as the best season that we've ever had on Survivor by most fans. There will be the outliner 5% of people out there that don't think it's the best season, but let's not forget, like, most people see this as the best season to ever be out there. Yeah. I'm extremely worried because we've got a cast of half newbies that are going to go up against a very heavy stacked cast of players that have got a lot of experience. I mean, will you really care about the new players in a season such as this? Because for me personally, I find it hard to get behind the fans, even in a fans versus favorites season.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really hard to get behind like a lot of like the fans this season or like the newbies. But I guess it really like determines who they cast, right? Like if they manage to find people who are literally like the worst of the worst in human society or in Australia, and some of the most
are you saying they should go get people from prison?
Yeah,
the
mate.
Worst of the worst.
Yeah, have like a Squid Game element. If you win Survivor, you're out of jail. Get out of free.
You're free.
Exactly. Like I think it really comes down to just like the name, the status. I wouldn't be surprised if like massive celebrities are once again casted onto the season. But I think if it's like massive heroes and massive villains, definitely the audience can get really, really behind it, I reckon.
I feel like they would have had to have gotten Danny on this season to, oversee all of these potential prison people going out there, because she's a corrections officer. You need her out there to keep control of those people. But I think personally, the direction they're going to go in is that they're probably going to go back to celebrities. Like, I mean, let's call a spade a spade. Champions versus Contenders 1, Champions versus Contenders 2 were all the times really newbies versus celebrities. That's really what it was. So they've always gotten sport fans to come and play the game. I don't think that they're going to change the formula here. I don't think that I think we'd be lucky to get true fans that are not well known in Australia to go up against a heavily stacked cast of well-known Australian Survivor players. These are going to definitely be people that have that they've achieved something out there. They're either an Olympian, or they, like I kind of put up there that the cricket captain a couple of years ago that sanded the ball so you could get extra swing on it. That's like a villainous thing. It might be like really big controversial things that they've done. They've been banned before from the sport because of using an illegal substance or something like that. But I feel like these will be well-known household names in Australia, at least. I don't know how that translates to the rest of the audience that are not from Australia, though.
Yeah, definitely. It's extremely hard for Australian Survivor, I think, because especially with like their casual audience, like heavily like dominates like the super fandom and the fans out there, which is why a lot of it is to do with the challenges and why everything is so over the top. It's all just for the casual audience. But I do think it was something I was only thinking about recently. I think that's why they keep bringing back returning players. I think that's why they had Russell, Sandra, Luke, is to really like Andy and Mark, like is all to like help like these kind of celebrity cast figures to actually play like a much more intense game, because if it was just celebrity and celebrity, we might get like kind of like a boring season. But having a returning player element, you definitely know they're going to spice up the game like a lot. So I think that's why they keep bringing back returning players like just randomly, like just to help the season along.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. I mean, one of my listeners on the channel pointed out to me that there has only been 2 seasons on Australian Survivor where we had full newbie casts. The rest of them, pretty much since then, we've always had returnees. So if you think about it, Russell Hance, obviously not a returnee in Australia, but played in the US before. They obviously knew what they were doing, bringing him in because they wanted to bring additional viewers that watch the US show. The US show is a lot more established than the Australian Survivor show, and it's got a very passionate fan base that has followed it for now plus 20 plus years. So they try to really tap into that. And then the season following that, they had Luke Toki come in, who is arguably the most popular player to ever play in Australian Survivor. And then straight after that, you had All Stars. Straight after that, you had Sandra Diaz-Twine and her daughter, and you had Mark and Sam and Andy coming back. So they really can't seem to do a season without having a returnee player at least in it. I really feel like Australian Survivor is almost becoming, I don't know if you watch this, but I'm a big fan of the challenge. It's almost like the challenge where half of the cast is returning every season, as well.
Yeah.
So it's this different hybrid that it's like evolving into its own thing, very different from what we see in the US or in South Africa, for instance.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it is quite interesting because I think especially for a lot of people, like Luke especially, like he obviously couldn't make it onto All Stars because of his like newborn child. So they're going for Champions League contenders. I think that's definitely something that like if they can't get a massive star like him onto All Stars, what's definitely the next best option, because definitely the fans and the casual audience, everyone wants to see Luke back like a million times. So yeah. I think it's definitely good to like bring back returning players like just
on the topic of Luke, like how big of a shock is it not to see him in this cast, right? Like the people that have been it's brought out to us that we will see a few people that we've seen before obviously come back. There's 12 of them. David Gannat is going to be one of those people that we're going to be seeing coming back here. You would have thought maybe Luke would be up there as well, but he's not someone that's going to play. Instead, we get David Gannat. How surprised are you about that?
Oh, mate, I'm extremely shocked. Like, if you're thinking about any sort of returning cast season, you got to think of David and Luke, and you really want to put both of them on the same season together. Just their dynamic, how they play the game, how far they're willing to go to change the game as well. It's just mind blowing. So, as much as I think David would definitely like do all that by himself, definitely seeing the chemistry between him and Luke has always just been so much fun. And Champions League Contenders, and on their podcast, like off season as well.
Yeah, they've got a great podcast. Obviously, I spoke to Luke not that long ago. There's a few people that are hoping he's going to be on the Challenge Australia, who I know is also currently casting. For people who listen to this podcast, I can't say who is on it, but there's not many Australian survivors on it. I know the names, but I'm not allowed to talk about that. Luke is not on it. He's not on that season. So if people are thinking that's why he's not on it, I'll break your dreams and dash it right now. I feel like it's a really big opportunity they missed to get Luke on there. And I'm wondering why, if they're going to go for the best of the best and they're going to bring some big heavy hitters like David Gannat and a couple of others we'll talk about, I'm surprised not to see Luke in this cast. And I think personally, Luke would have been a hero where David is a villain, because yes, he does villainous things, but he's the people's champion and he does it in a way where it doesn't come across as villainous, if that makes sense. But let's talk about someone who is on the cast, David Gannat, right? He's coming back. He's seen as the best player to ever play an Australian Survivor by many, right? Most people say he's the best player ever. Most people say he's got the most dominant win ever. And it's hard to argue against, because he went against people who've played the game before and he did beat them pretty convincingly in that season.
Yeah.
How positive do you feel about David Gannott's chances coming into a season such as this? Do you think that he's going to do well? What's the path forward here for him?
As much as I love the Golden God, like he won my heart in Champions League contenders. Like I was rooting for him so hard in All Stars, and I was so happy that he won. But I think coming back so soon is definitely a pre-merge boot. I think he's got such a massive target. He's like one of the few winners coming back, I believe, or the only winner. So
no, there's a few. There's a few. So to give you an idea, it's going to be 3 winners coming back in total. So it's Dave Gannott, Hayley Leake, and Christy Bennett.
That's right. Yeah.
I believe David Gannott, most likely Villians tribe, most likely in the same tribe as Hayley and George. Hayley and George will work together. So I think David Gannott's way to the future here is to say to both George and Hayley, who are going to be just almost as big of a threats as him, to really say we need to protect each other at least until the merge. We need to get to the merge together at least. And that's his way forward. But I don't think Hayley and George keeps David Gannott very deep after a merge. I can actually see him in this configuration make it to the merge. He shouldn't make it to the merge, but I can see him get there.
Yeah, I think David, I'm kind of scared for him because I feel like he could definitely go down a Henry route in All Stars where he tries to play hard, but he just can't get the people under him to join him. A very similar thing happened in The Apprentice. I think that's what the show is called, like Celebrity Apprentice, where he made like one move that was pretty funny, and then straight away everyone just turned on him, and he was just the next one out. So I feel like that could definitely happen again. I definitely don't want it to happen. Like I hope he's Australian's first 2-time winner, but yeah, I feel like his chances in the game aren't going to be.
I'm very nervous for him.
Yeah,
very, very nervous for him coming in with. I don't feel that many built-in alliances. If Luke was there, I mean, David and Luke together were magic, especially in that season. And also, let's not forget that he's coming into the season with a rival as well. So the rival obviously being Sean from his original season, someone that he did not get along with all that well. And they went head-to-head in that season. And Sean, I think, is going to be in the opposite tribe from David Gannott. I believe he's going to be in the Euros tribe here coming in because he very much was the leader. He kind of held that Contenders alliance together and then couldn't convince them to make a move against Luke and David earlier and ended up taking both David and Luke to the merge. But he saw the writing on the wall before they got to the merge and then ultimately was an early boot when he got there. I think that between the two of them, I really feel good about Sean here. The only thing that potentially could be a downside for him coming into a season such as this, when we've just had a big, strong alpha male guy like Mark Wales won his season, he could have a little bit of that target on him where people are like, oh, he's the Mark Wales of this season. But I could very easily see him be like a Mark Wales because he was quite strategic in his season. He just never really found his footing because he went up against two excellent players and they got the better of him, you know?
Arguably, Sean went toe-to-toe against 2 of Australian Survivor's most strategic players that like Australian Survivor's ever had. So I think Sean definitely has a strong chance this season because he went out definitely as a strong hero. But while he's like a massive challenge beast, he only won 1 challenge, and he never really made any like massive like strategic moves because like they gave all that time and attention towards like David, Luke, and Andy. So I feel like while he's coming in with the target on his back, it's definitely not a target where people are like, oh, Sean is exactly like Mark. Like, you get what I mean? Like, it's more of like, oh, Sean Hills is this really nice guy who unfortunately just got cut short, like at the merge. So I feel like Sean can definitely make like a really deep run this season. Definitely like post merge. But
I think so. I think he can do well. The fear that I have is that Mark also didn't really get to show what he was capable of in his first season. So people could draw that parallel and just say this is a similar type of person. But then again, do you really want to get rid of someone like Sean early before the merge when you're going to be going up against the likes of a David Gannott on the other side? You need to fight fire with fire. So I feel like you need him in your tribe in the early stages. Now, we were talking about winners, and you mentioned that you would love for David to be the first two-time winner of Australian Survivor. Let's talk about Hayley next, someone that also could become a two-time winner here. A lot of people out there believe she's a better player than David Gannat. There's people that says that she had the best winning game of Australian Survivor. There are fans that really strongly stand by Hayley when it comes to that. I've always been lower on her win because I'm a purist and she was voted out. So I always feel like if you're voted out, I put you in a different category. She's better than Chris Underwood, and she's better than the South African winner from season 1 for South Africa who came back and won that season. She's the best out of the winners that got voted out. As a player, I can make the argument she may be better than David or she's at his level. I understand that because I can differentiate between a winning game and the player, if that makes sense. I think she's a great, player. Hats off to her. She played by the rules that were there in that season. She deserved her win. The jury decided that she was the one who played the better game between her and George. She could be the next person to win twice. And I do think that most people don't look at her win in the way that I do. And they definitely look at her as the player. And she's going to come in with a massive threat here this season as well. How do you feel about Hayley's chances coming into a season such as this? And rumor has it she's going to be a villain, which I'm very shocked about because I would have definitely thought she's a hero. Like she fought back from the brink to come back and, get to the end. And I would really like her and George to be split up. I wouldn't like it if both of them are in the villains tribe.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like Hayley definitely played quite a villainous game pre-merge, especially. I feel like her game before she got voted out was definitely quite a villainous game. Like, don't forget the infamous Joey blindside. She was able to use her idol to make the Brawns turn on each other, and then she obviously got all the Brawns to turn on Simon as well. And then she obviously ratted out George being like the double agent and stuff. So she definitely did play like somewhat of a villainous game, like before she was voted out. But I think definitely after she was voted out, she came back. Her focus was very much changed on, okay, how can I actually get to the end? And thankfully, that's when it was really George against the Brawn, well, George against everyone, basically, at that point. But I feel like Hayley can definitely do really well because especially after she came back from Redemption Rock, she was still a massive threat, but everyone just shifted their attention. And I feel like having the likes of David and George and even Nina as well, everyone's eyes are going to be focused on them, but they might slowly forget about Hayley, and she might be able to weasel her way all the way through to the finals again, I reckon.
Yeah, and it's interesting because there's a lot of the times when winners come back in Survivor, they don't know what it feels like to be voted out. And you can't say the same for Hayley. She's been voted out. She understands what it feels like, people not talking to her before she gets voted out. She's probably going to see the signals if it happens early in her season. In fact, you could argue that George might have that blind spot because he was never voted out in his season, and he might not see it coming if people start turning against him. And the same for Christy Bennett, who obviously is going to come back as well. So let's talk about Christy Bennett next. She is a winner that won the first season of the reboot over in Australia. A lot of people, I feel like, aren't the biggest Christy Bennett fans, and I think for her being this big super fan that played the game, she watched all the versions of the show, she really knew what to say to the jury at the end. She was clearly a student because she sold. I think she's one of the best people that have ever played Survivor in any season of the show, because I think she oversold herself at the end, but the jury ate it up and they voted for her. Well deserved, because you play until the last minute, right? So I feel like she's coming back, and the reason she's coming back is because she's got a chip on her shoulder and she wants to prove she is a great player.
When I think of Christy, I think of George in terms of both of their games were like a massive fluke. Like how Christy was able to survive so many split votes. Don't forget the tribal when Sue had left, she was meant to be voted out then. Massive fluke that she won the final challenge against two of the most strongest challenge competitors that season, and Elle and Lee. And but I feel like she's definitely coming in with no real target on her back. Obviously, she is like a winner, but I think everyone's kind of forgotten about Christy as well, because we've had so many larger names like David, like Pierre, and even Hayley as winners, and obviously much more bigger players. But I think everyone has slowly forgotten Christy, so I feel like she's in a really good spot to come back.
My money is on her. If I had to decide between the three winners who could become the first two-time winner of Australian Survivor, my money is on Christy, because I feel like she's sitting in the exact pocket where you want to sit. You're clearly someone who's capable, but people have forgotten about you. She's stayed in shape. She has stayed in touch with the Survivor community. I've had a chat with her a while ago before I even knew that she was going to go out there to play the game again. She knows about the podcasts. She knows what people are saying about different players and things like that. So she's very aware, and that's a very good place for her to sit in. I hope she does well. I really want her to go out there and prove herself. And not that she has to. She's won. I mean, she's got $1 million or $500,000 that we don't have. So she's already proven herself to a degree. But I think that she's doing this for herself, not for anybody else. Going out there and playing again, and she's going to be in the Heroes tribe as well. So, and I do look at her as a hero. Like you said, she was the underdog. No one expected her to win out against bigger challenge threats at the end, and she just stayed there and wanted it more than others. Now, let's talk about another female hero coming back this season, and this is someone I think that no one is surprised to see back. It was just a matter of when are they going to bring back Nina. Nina's coming back to back. She's going to be a hero here this season. Tell me about this specific pick on this Heroes versus Villains season. Are you happy to see her back so quickly? How do you feel about the fact that we do have some pre-mergers here coming back to play in a semi-all-star season?
I think it's amazing that we're getting pre-mergers coming back, especially Nina. She was definitely super robbed with her injury. She was definitely going to go really far in that season, I believe, as well. And I think the entire game of Blood versus Water rested on Nina. If she did not get medically evacuated, would Mark have had such a dominant win? Because Nina, she could have flipped on Mark. She was definitely a strong people person, so she could have rallied the troops, even blindside Mark and Josh. So I think Nina coming back is really awesome. I think the fans, casuals and super fans, are really excited to see how she would do in the Heroes versus Villains. And
yeah, I mean, I spoke to a lot of her cast after the season was over, and everybody had only good things to say about Nina. Now, it could be that they all knew, Jonathan was out there telling them that she would be the first person to come back in an all-star season because he kind of announced it, and they were already pre-gaming. But everybody had only nice things to say about her. They said that, strategically, she was very in tune. She was good socially. She played in a way where apparently her mother was very pushy. She wasn't pushy, but she still got her way. So that's interesting. I feel like when I look at Nina's game, she's not a two-time winner. She's playing under this massive shadow of her mother, but dare I say that I feel like she's got more potential than her mother. And it's crazy to even think about because Sandra won twice. She was the first one to ever do that, and she did it back to back, which was insane. I mean, for me, anything after that is just gravy when we saw her come back. It was always going to be difficult to win for a third time. I feel like it's almost impossible. There shouldn't even be a two-time winner when there's so many non-winners in a season. So what she did was amazing. But I feel like Nina is like a hybrid of her mother when it comes to the social strategic, but then she also brings the physicality in. She was very good in that season. It's going to be a challenge for her going up. If the rumors are true, Hayley is in the Villains tribe, Nina's on the Heroes tribe. She's going to have a lot more competition this time to be good at the physical stuff if she goes up against someone like a Hayley, for instance. But I'm excited to see her come back. I always said if a Heroes versus Villains season was there, how awesome would it be if she was in the Heroes tribe, which she's apparently going to be. All of this is still rumor and speculation at this stage, and they haven't even started filming. That's the crazy thing. We know the cast and they haven't started filming. What do you think the likelihood is that we get to, a month or 2 months from now and we find out, listen, this cast was a complete fake. This is what they're doing.
I feel like there's definitely a strong case for it, especially because, since it hasn't started filming yet, we don't know for certain if this cast is 100% yes or no. So maybe even the producers have seen that their cast is leaked, so they might change it just to surprise everyone. But not even if this cast of returnees did go out, I'd still be super happy to see them. But I'd also be keen to see some other people that weren't picked as well. Yeah.
We will talk about that in a little bit, so keep that in the back of your head as we continue to talk about the people here that are rumored. And just for those that are listening, this is still speculation at this stage, and no, we're talking about it like it's already happening. I mean, you could have these people sitting there in Ponderosa looking at the videos, and as we're analyzing and putting targets on people here, like they're like, "Oh, Christy is not a target." Christy might just message me and say, "Chris, why are you putting this heat on me before I even go out there and play the game?"
Yeah, definitely.
Let's talk about someone that I'm a big fan of now. For those that are new to the channel and don't know this, I am a South African as well. I was born, but I've lived in New Zealand for nearly 15 years now. So I'm a little bit of a hybrid. I normally get the best of both worlds when it comes to rugby, because South Africa and New Zealand traditionally are the best rugby teams, but we've just both lost this last weekend. So that doesn't happen very often. Being such a big rugby fan, I know who Matt Rogers is. I knew when he went out there to go play the first time. He used to play for Australia. I thought it was an interesting choice because I knew him as a rugby player, didn't think of him as a strategic mastermind necessarily. But when he went out there, he was the godfather of Australian Survivor. And I dare say, I think he's one of the best strategic players to have never won Australian Survivor. He's a legitimate threat. He's good physically. He's good strategically. He's good socially. And apparently he's going to be a hero on this tribe. What do you think, or on this season, what do you think of Matt potentially coming back here for this season?
I love the fact that Matt is coming back. He's definitely like a massive hero in Australian Survivor, especially with his All-Stars run, like being just a constant underdog, just over and over, just finding ways to scrape by. Even when he was tribe swapped and he had zero allies, absolutely zero allies, and so many people wanting him out, he's still like made it pretty far to that, just like slipping through the cracks. I'm really excited to see Matt back. I think definitely after All-Stars, if you had to choose one player to come back from that season, Matt is definitely number one on that. And I feel like he can definitely go really far again, because I think with his first time he played such a dominant game, people might have been quite like scared of him. But now that he played such like an underdog, scrappy game, people are probably going to forget that he was this massive, dominant, strategic force that that only just got blindsided, and it had to be by one of the most greatest strategic minds in Benji to pull it off as well. But yeah, I think Matt is definitely post-merge. I definitely see him going really far this season.
Yeah, I think that, you look at that tribe, who's going to be the big other alpha guy in that tribe? It's going to be Sean. And Sean has also got a sporting career. I think he played rugby league or AFL. I'm not too sure which one of the two codes he played. Yeah. And, you've got someone like Matt who played both rugby league and rugby union. They're going to have something to, relate to on that, which he didn't have that in the tribe and All-Stars with the likes of David Gannett and Lockie and those guys who kind of clicked earlier than him being able to find a way in. But he still did okay. And I think that if that tribe swap didn't happen, him and David Gannett would have played a bit deeper. They would have gone a bit deeper. And if David Gannett gets to a post-merge situation, Matt gets to a post-merge situation, I mean, there could be some crazy stuff on the forefront again, like, alliances that no one knows about. People will probably look out for that. But it could be an exciting game. And Matt being on this season is going to make for an exciting game. And I believe you're right. His threat level may be lower. People might look at him as this lovable older guy instead of the legitimate threat that he is potentially coming into a season such as this. Let's keep moving along to another three-time player that is going to be coming back here potentially in this season. And this is someone that, the fans, if they had a choice, they would say put her on every single season until season 100. We would not be angry at seeing her. It's going to be Shani. She's going to come back as another three-times player here. Tell us a little bit about your thoughts on seeing Shani back on a season such as this. Apparently she's a villain. I would have looked at her more as a hero, to be honest. This is just according to the spoilers. They could still change who's in what tribe.
I definitely love seeing Shani. I think one of my favorite moments of All Stars is Shani coming back from exile, saying that she will not rest until like everyone who voted out are the next people to go. And Abby, Lydia, and John were like the next three to go, like out of that season. Yeah, she's definitely very ruthless. I love Shani so much, like as a person, as a player. And yeah, I definitely agree, especially after the All Stars run. She's definitely a massive hero, massive fan favorite, huge underdog throughout the entire season. But I definitely do think she's got that like villainous spark to her as well, kind of like a Cruella kind of vibe, where she's definitely like a dark horse in terms of she could be your best friend, but like if you like piss her off once, like you're dead to her. She's like the Abby Maria of of Australian Survivor. So yeah, I definitely think Shoney's going to go quite far, because when you look at Shoney, you see it's like a massive social threat, definitely like a strategic threat as well, but not someone like a David where you like instantly know, okay, this guy's going to blindside me soon, so I might as well get rid of him. Like Shoney is also like insanely loyal, like to like AK and Brooke, to Nick and Harry, like obviously Fenella as well. She's insanely loyal, but as soon as you really cross her, that's when all guns are blazing. And I think once you've done it, you've got to be really careful of Shani. So yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, listen, Shawnee is fun. I will be honest, I was a little bit low when I heard she was coming back, and I know people, fans of the show, would be like, "Why are you low? How dare you be low of Shawnee coming back?" But it's, for me, I was just thinking, do we need this many 3-time players? Like, there's so many other players that have not come back. Can we save Shawnee for like a legitimate big season, which Heroes versus Villains in my mind should have been? Like, you should have waited 2 or 3 seasons, maybe even 4, and then bring back an all-star cast of Heroes versus Villains. It would have been so much more impactful, you know. And I feel like there's other themes we could have done prior to that. Like, it could have been literally vets versus rookies, or, you know, there could have been different themes they could have come up with. I think that they're running out of ideas, and it's a big fear that I have for Australian Survivor, that they only know how to copy. They don't know how to create their own themes. Like, yes, they've done champions versus contenders. Some would argue that that's kind of like a David versus Goliath. But I'm worried. I've got a bit of a theory here on what they potentially would have to do going into the next season. Because how I look at Australian Survivor, right, is that it's kind of like this snowball that is just going down a mountain, and it's just gaining more and more momentum. Every time they're like, we have to go more crazy with the twists. We have to do more gambles and roulettes, and people going out of the game, coming back in, 2 people deciding to vote when there's 12 people left in the game. Like, just crazy things that they're doing in the game. They're trying to break it. But you've got to ask yourself, like, when they do this season, what's next? Because they've now again made the Australian Survivor public aware that they can't do a newbie season. It's just they don't have the faith in enough newbies coming in there playing an entertaining game, and also the audience being interested enough to watch it. So in my mind, my theory is that there is only one place for them to go after this season, and that is going to be a Survivor Worldwide season. Where else do they go after this season? What else can they do?
I think like everyone's been manifesting a worldwide season at some point, whether it's Australia against US, or like all 3, South Africa, US, and Australia all coming together. Yeah, it's definitely quite hard for Australia trying to have like all these massive big themes to hook, like especially the casual audience on. Because while I personally think the season 2 2017 is the best season of all time, especially for Australian Survivor, the ratings for it were quite low. And that's just because it was just more the fans watching it more than just the casual audience.
But yeah, I also think I just want to add there. That's an interesting point you bring up, because I know that there's a few people that's their favorite season. It's my second favorite season after Champs vs Contenders 2, which is my favorite season. Because just of the all-star cast they had, that's such a good cast that season, which again, that proves that bringing some celebrities in probably can be entertaining. But for me, it's not about the celebrities, because I didn't know them prior to that. It was about the characters just being engaging enough. I think that season 2, the fact that they had those lower ratings had to do with the fact that season 1 was boring to watch. It was slow. There was a lot of "don't be a snake," "how dare you do alliances." So it was hard. It was like watching paint dry on a wall at times, you know. And I think that there was like an after effect that carried into season 2, where people weren't that into it. And then with Champions versus Contenders 1, they did the right thing, and I understood why they had to do that twice in a row to bring people back to the show, and it clearly worked. But you know, even in my mind, like Brains versus Brawn, there was a lot of mechanics in the game I didn't like, too many twists and things like that. But they had a pretty much newbie cast that really dominated that season. So I think they proved that they don't have to go and do half and half returnees or bring players back. They can have a good season without that, in my mind.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's you know, it's definitely crazy to think about, like how there's only 2 seasons without like returning players in Australian Survivor. But yeah, I think Australian Survivor is just trying to look for like massive themes to really just draw everyone in. And I do think with the All Stars, Brains vs Brawn, Blood versus Water, it's trying to hook both the super fandom and the casual audience. But I do think it is trying to like primarily like go for the casual audience. but I wouldn't be surprised if next few seasons are just ordinary seasons as well. Especially because with Blood versus Water dropping really low in ratings as well, like towards the merge.
Yeah.
I feel like with Heroes vs Villains, if it goes really well and it's really high again, they probably could do just like ordinary seasons again, because they would have had the casual audience ratings there and the super fan audience as well.
Yeah.
You know,
What do you think of a Survivor Battle of the Tasman? You know, you get New Zealand and Australia going up against each other in a season, and there's this already built-in rivalry. It doesn't have to be New Zealand survivors. Like, I'm pitching this so you can apply, or I can apply for this thing. But like at the end of the day, you get some New Zealanders going up against Australians in a season. Like, I feel like they have to have a theme in Australia for people to be interested. And I'm just wondering, like, what is the next theme? Like, after Heroes versus Villains, you've now taken the three of the biggest themes in Survivor already. You might bring Game Changers in next, but like, you're already using everybody. So like, who do you use for Game Changers? So I feel like they're going to run out of runway pretty soon with the way that they're going, in my mind. So maybe like an Anzac battle, or Battle of the Tasman, or something like that, where you get the two countries going up against each other. I know that the Amazing Race did that in one of the Australian seasons, where it was Australian teams versus New Zealand teams.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, that might be like a really cool idea, especially because you're introducing the worldwide concept as well. If you were to do like a Battle of the Tasman or a Battle of the Anzacs, but yeah, no, that might actually be quite cool actually if Australia was to branch out towards like more other countries. I'm pretty sure it said that Australia's going back to Samoa as well. So
yes,
like,
I saw that.
So definitely going out to more international waters again, which is quite cool. But yeah, no, it's quite interesting to think about what Australian Survivor could do next.
That's my thing. Maybe that's a podcast for itself on its own, but I'm just sort of thinking out loud here. So let's go into another person here that is rumored to return on the Heroes tribe, and it's going to be Flick. I'm very shocked to see three people that were from the same season, number 1, 2, and 3, all back, rumored to come back in a season. This is going to be the first time ever that a final 3 are all back, I think. I don't know if it's happened before. Maybe there is a Survivor historian that remembers better than me, but I feel like this is history in the making here.
You know, absolutely. And I feel like with Flick as well, she's, in my opinion, she's definitely one of the biggest heroes in Survivor as well. Super likable, like massive underdog towards the end as well. Definitely not the best strategically, but I feel like she's definitely got strong chances to win every season she plays. I feel like if you were to replay Brains vs. 100 times, she probably wins like almost half the time.
Yeah, well, Flick, actually, from the conversations that people who've been on his season have had with myself, and kind of where I'm sort of figuring out the jury was lying, is that Flick would have run away with the season if she got to the final against Hayley or George. She would have had all the votes. So socially, she was very aware and really good. Strategically, I think she tried to play the game, but she was just outplayed by Hayley and George in a massive way. But that jury voted more so for people they liked, and I'm not saying this as a bad thing, because every jury has to make their own decision on how they want to vote and what they value, if that makes sense. But in a season such as that, I think you're right, she probably would have won in a lot of seasons. The problem is that can Flick strategically mastermind her way to the end of the game each season? I'm not as confident about that. I think if she does get to the end, she's going to have a strong case, and obviously definitely a big hero. Happy to see her come back. I don't know if I'm happy about the fact that it's all three, George, Hayley, and also Flick in the same season together. I feel like it maybe is a little bit too much, or maybe you should have looked at a few earlier people from that season that went out a bit earlier or something, just to mix it up and give some more people love. But let's talk about someone else from that season. It was a popular season, like I said. So the last person here that is coming back from that season as well is going to be George. Now, I'm the biggest George fan. Like, George is up there for me with Luke and Dave Gennard is like one of the greatest characters to ever be on the show. Great strategic mastermind. I still believe he should have won that season. I understand why he didn't win that season, because he wasn't good socially, and he still wasn't socially aware at the end game that he needed to humble himself. In his mind, he thought it was all in the game. People respected the moves and the big plays that he made. But sadly, that's just not how juries work. They don't just hand you a win for being better than them, And I think he's probably, in my mind, the best to never win, maybe up there with a Luke. It's one of those two for me, and they're probably pretty like there's an argument to be made for both here. I think he's coming up pretty much with the biggest target, and if he didn't come back with Haley on the same tribe, I would have said he's one of the first boots out of the game.
Oh, absolutely. I still think even with Haley, there's definitely a strong chance he's like the first boot of the season. I love George so much as well. Definitely one of my favorite players. But just like what I mentioned with Christy, he definitely played one of like the most fluke games possible. I feel like the only way he could have got into the end was exactly the way how he got into the end in Brains versus Brawn. I feel like it was just how many times everyone was just against him. Everyone had like enough of him, and he still managed to scrape by. I think it's just absolute genius. But I think everyone has seen that is George's game. That's probably George at his best as well. I think definitely like he's been working on like him being more social and stuff like that. I've definitely seen across his Instagram, he's hanging out with more different Survivor players, like people who are definitely quite strong socially as well. So I feel like he's definitely developing more like stronger like social skills and whatnot. But yeah, I definitely think his target is probably more bigger than David's, and I think it could potentially come down to like a Tyson and Kim situation where it's like, who do you take out? They're both like massive threats, right? But I definitely do think
you take out David. That's
yeah,
the answer every single time.
Yeah, definitely. But I see a case on keeping David, whereas for George, there isn't a strong case for keeping him. So I'm very worried for him.
It depends on. I was going to say, it depends on what you make your main criteria, right? Like if you are looking for someone that's going to physically help your tribe win challenges to get to the merge, which is such a vanilla Survivor game because 2 or 3 episodes in, or 4, 5, 6, whatever episodes in. Obviously, it's a longer game in Australia. It might be 6 episodes in. They'll do a swap at some stage. So it doesn't really matter too much to keep strength because you'll end up in a different tribe. So it's more about who can you trust. Now, both of them are very devious players who will lie to you to your face and then backstab you while laughing to the bank, right? So you can't trust either one of them. So what it really comes down to for me between the two of them is who's got a better chance at winning the money if they get to the end. And I think David's got a better chance to win the money. If you're someone that is not socially that aware, he might be doing like, and again, I'm only going off what I saw in the edit. I've had great one-on-one conversations via DM with him. He's a great guy. I can tell he's a good guy. I'm just going off the edit. I'm not talking about him in person. But the fear that I have is that, yes, he's hanging out with a lot of survivors. Will that translate to the new players? Will he have that same respect for the new players that he potentially has for people who have played the game before? Will he understand that that's important? Now, I hope that, he is a student of the game. He does know where he lost the game. So I think he's working on that. And not only that, I've seen him in the gym a lot. He's working on his physique. He's trying to get in better shape. Clearly, he had a heads up that the season was coming, and he started getting in shape 5, 6, 7 months ago already. He was in the gym. And he was on Talking Tribal quite recently, which also worked on his social awareness and communicating with different people and talking strategy. And that's another thing. It's like, how much does being on Talking Tribal affect both him and Haley coming into the season? Because they've talked about their decision-making process and how they would do things in certain situations. Will that put a bigger target on them as well? I think it will with the returning players. I don't think the new players are fans. I don't think they know who any of these players are coming into the show. I think they're all celebrities.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that while we're talking about like how like George has been doing all this like secret behind the scenes stuff, most of the people casted probably won't even know who George is, most likely, because that's just unfortunate with Australian Survivor casting that a lot of celebrities don't actually watch the show before they even play. But if that's the case, George could still definitely make like a big run. But I do think there's like an Andy effect where I think Andy would have been perfect for Heroes versus Villains, not Blood versus Water. But I feel like him coming on Blood versus Water was just a fraction too soon, that people still knew like what he was doing, what he was up to, like the first time he played, which made him have a massive target. And I feel like the same effect could happen on George.
You make such a good point. Bloody hell, that's such a good point, because I'm a big Andy fan as well. I love what Andy brings. Obviously, my favorite season that he played in. And Andy is a capable player. He was drawing dead in that season, because who did he have with him in that season? Mark Wales. Mark didn't have a name in Survivor prior to last season. I do respect him now, and his win was dominant. And you've got to put his win up there as one of the best to do it in Australia. You have to. He got a unanimous vote at the end, But coming into that season, he didn't have that reputation that Andy already had. And I think that Andy was a weasel villainous player in a season without anybody else that could take that target off him. The only luck that someone like a George has is that he does have Geordie and he does have David Gannett in this season, who are two other guys who are also very villainous, and I think both can be very big threats to win the game if they get to the end. So that's maybe the angle that if I was a George, I would take if I was talking to people, is to say, yes, I can do all these things, but am I realistically, do you think I've got the chance of actually pulling the votes together at the end? There's David here or Geordie, who were extremely likable last season as well. And let's talk about Geordie next. Let me know, with Geordie, what is your thoughts on him coming back into the season? Were you a Geordie fan last season? Did you like what he brought to the show? Or were you one of those people that thought that he was a bit of a screen hog and got too much of the airtime?
I feel like Geordie is like the child of Benji. I love Benji so much. I feel like both Benji and Geordie had very similar type of like confessionals and gameplay. But I do think when it comes to both of them, Benji's definitely a better player. I feel like Geordie was more of a reactionist villain than like an actual villain, because definitely with brutal blindside on his brother, that caused him to have such a villainous arc to do everything he can to take down like Mark and Sam. And I feel like he's coming in, well, he's definitely like a screen time threat. If I don't recall, he like apart from actually like being able to blindside like Sam, didn't he go? Was it the next vote or was that Juicy Dave?
Sorry, repeat that last question.
So was it Juicy Dave who went before Geordie, or did Geordie get voted out right after Samantha?
Juicy Dave went before Geordie, from memory.
Before Geordie, that's right. Yeah. But
because basically what they did was, Geordie and Josh got together with Shay at the reward, and they had that night away where they all talked about protecting each other for a little bit longer in the game. And he found a way to turn Josh against Juicy before turning against Geordie ultimately there. And he kind of threw Juicy Dave under the bus because Juicy Dave was willing to move against Josh at that stage in the game. So that got him a position for the real fear that I have for Geordie coming into the season, I look at Geordie as, clearly one of the fan favorites, clearly someone who brought a lot of excitement and entertainment to the season. He was kind of like the George of the season for me. Like, George got all the screen time, and he got all the screen time here because he gave some of the better confessionals. He was not afraid to mix things up and bring the chaos as the Joker. But I looked at his game as a very, very flawed game. He made moves at times where he shouldn't have. He should have played more of. The problem is that I understand that you can preempt the type of game you want to play before you go out there. And you're like, I'm going to be a legend in this game. I'm going to be an all-star, which with his gameplay, I think he played to become an all-star at a certain point in the game. He was like, I'm not winning this, so I might as well go out being memorable so I can come back, which mission accomplished. He's back for another season, and you can't hate him for that. He got another shot at it. But did he play a great winning game? No, because he made moves because he wanted to turn against Josh and Jordan and drive that wedge between Mark and them at a time where he could have just, stayed true to that alliance a little bit longer. When you talk to all the other people that were from that season, which I interviewed quite a few of them. I was very fortunate enough to interview quite a few of the guys from that season. They said when Geordie came to them about Mark's idol, and everybody was so frustrated at them for not knowing that Mark and Sam had idols, right? They said that Geordie did that type of stuff, even pre-merge, where he was lying about things and he got caught on lies consistently. So he had no credibility when he came, and people didn't believe him because they were thinking he's just telling another lie. He's trying to create chaos for no reason. So I think that if he comes in doing that again, we will see him flame out, probably somewhere after the merge. He is good at immunity, so he could win a few getting his way to the end, but he's not going to win. He needs to actually sort of rein that chaos side of him in a little bit and build trust and credibility with a few key people in the game if he wants to go deep in this season. So I'm a little bit worried for Geordie, but it's an interesting villains tribe because you've got Geordie, George, Haley, all together in the same season with David in that tribe as well. They're going to have to protect each other because if they don't, they're going to be going home pretty quickly.
Yeah, it's quite funny. You got probably like three of the biggest screen time hogs like on the same tribe. Like
So we might finally get a balanced edit from Australian Survivor.
yeah, exactly. Except instead of like newest players, it would just be them three, just completely different sides of the tribe. Yeah.
Yeah, well, listen, I'm here for it. Like, I hope they do something different with the edit this season, just so that it's not so predictable on who's going to win. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know how predictable you found it to be, but last season, I think it was episode 2 or 3, I was like, well, Mark's clearly winning this season. And then at one point I was like, oh, maybe Sam's got a chance because she's actually also starting to. But then I was like, maybe they're both getting a great edit because one of the two of them's going to win because, you know, the ones that the pardon of the other ones. But I always stayed on Mark throughout it, and he ended up winning it. And the season before that, I also picked Haley very early on. So I was shocked when she got voted out. But then when she came back, I was like, oh, that's how she wins.
Yeah.
So hopefully they make it more unpredictable, right?
Yeah, I saw on like after the Joey blindside, everyone's like, oh, Haley's winning the season. Might as well stop watching. But like, I never really saw her after that one move that she was gonna win the season. I just thought, oh, she's great, playing like a great pre-merge game. But yeah, I definitely I thought Shannon like was gonna win. I thought Simon could have potentially won. Even Joey. I think literally right before Joey got voted out, I was like, oh, it's obvious he's gonna win the season. And then it gets blindsided literally the next episode. So I haven't found it too predictable, but yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think you bring up a good point. That season had some great pre-merge characters. The problem that I find is that Australian Survivor will create these great pre-merge characters, which is interesting to see their downfall, right? But then when they get taken out, like the Simons, the Shannons, the Joeys, those were all pre-merge people. It leaves you with one option. So you're like, oh, okay, clearly it's Haley because all the other potential winners have been taken out. And then George, I was like, there's just no way this guy goes to the end and win. And then every weekend or week, he's surviving another vote, like you said. He's doing these crazy things to stay in the game. And I'm like, is this guy going to go to the end? Like, how's he going to get to the end? I just never believed he could get there. And he proved me wrong. I loved it every week. I was like, man, I hope he gets to the end. I'm enjoying watching him, but I just don't think he's going to get there, And I think, again, that's why George could still be dangerous in a season such as this. We could find ourselves saying that week in and week out. There's no way he's getting to the end. And then he somehow finds a way to pull a rabbit out of the hat. But I do think that these guys, if they stick together and they start voting out some of the newbies early on, they could find themselves going very deep in the game. And being returnee players, half returnee, half newbie in a tribe, it's an interesting setup. They could have gone in a way where it was like, these are all the villains that are coming back, and you guys are all the heroes, the new players, but they didn't. They mixed the two tribes. So that will make for an interesting dynamic early on. But I do think it favors returning players more than newbies because they'll have a common target on their backs as returning players. They're going to want to at least secure their spot for a couple of votes and then maybe get one or two newbies that they can use as, pawns to get through the game.
Yeah, definitely. I think the villains tribe is definitely going to be extremely interesting because George went head-to-head against Mitch on the very first episode because Mitch was obviously like the leader of the tribe. I can definitely see him doing the same thing against David. Obviously, like Haley wanted to take out like the Alpha and Joey. Obviously, Geordie, who was going after like Mark for quite some time, and then eventually Josh. So I definitely feel like, well, it's definitely in their best interest to stick together for like at least a few votes. I can definitely see them turning on each other very quickly as well.
Yeah. Now, let's talk about the last two heroes remaining that we haven't spoken about yet. One of them is going to be Craig, and I think that he's also somebody that is extremely popular when it comes to the fans. A lot of people have said they want to see Craig come back. He played the first season of the returnee All-Australian Survivor season when they rebooted it. He was someone that early on showed strategic chops. He was great socially, but ended up, if I remember it correctly, this is going back a while, so you refresh my memory if I'm wrong here, Tessa ended up taking him out in that season, or was it Phoebe?
It was Phoebe, yeah.
I always get those two mixed up. I don't know why. But anyway, so Phoebe ended up getting him out in that season. She got the idol, played it, and then got him out of the game early on. So I am glad that he gets to come back and play a redemption season because if you look at a player such as him, I think that he was ahead of his time as well in that season, surrounded by people who didn't really want to play too big of a strategic game.
Yeah. I mean, in my opinion, Craig was playing the most perfect game possible. And I think Phoebe knew that as well. And that's why she had to idle him out because he was definitely like the leader of the tribe. He was the anchor of the tribe. And right from day one, everyone was around him. not once did anyone mention his name. He was part of every alliance on like all the tribes, even like on the when the Aganoas came over as well. I'm pretty sure like a lot of times he was interacting with them and stuff. He flipped on Andrew with them as well, along with Kate. So yeah, he's definitely got really great strategic chops and social chops. And I feel like just like Christy, no one's really going to see him as like a massive threat because he didn't really do anything to prove he's a massive threat, like a David George or Geordie, for example. So,
but he's capable.
He's very
He's
capable.
sleeping. He's a sleeping giant coming into this season. And I know for a fact that he has very much kept an eye on the Survivor community. He is involved in a couple of online Facebook Survivor groups. I think he's keeping an eye on things. So, watch out for him coming into this season. He may be a pre-season potential winner pick. Before we even know if he's on the show, he could be someone that I think could go very deep.
Absolutely. He's definitely a pre-casting winner pick.
Yeah, pre-casting is the right way to look at it here. It's so weird. Like I've never seen a season where we know so much before the season even goes live. So, like I said, I wouldn't be shocked if the producers or the casting department still has an ace up their sleeve, and if they do end up changing one or two or doing something that we don't expect here going into the end. But let's talk about the last person that is returning that we haven't spoken about. And I'm going to be honest, when this name came up, Jenna from Champions vs. Contenders 1, I believe, I had to think really hard about who she was. Like, she's one of those people that went very early in her season. Then I kind of remembered she ended up with an injury from memory early on in that season, got medevac, was a battler, tried very hard to continue through the challenges and things like that. She's coming back as a hero. I just want to put it out there that I'm happy for everybody getting their second chance. And if she ever listens to this, I'm so happy that you get your second chance. As a fan, as a person that takes like the emotion of the individual that is going out there and getting their second chance, looking at this very critically, I'm not overly excited by this pick from casting. Like, this is the one, if we had to pick a person that we said, what WTF, like what's going on, it would be her. And Jenna, if you listen to this is no hatred to you as a person. This is just based on your body of work. The first time that you played the game, if you go out there and you play the best game, I'll eat crow any day of the week. But based on what we've seen so far, this is not the most exciting pick for me.
Absolutely, yeah. Now I believe so. When All Stars came out, there was like a leaked cast for that as well. And instead of Jericho and Shane, it was Jenna and Heath from the same season. But then when the official cast came out, it was everyone but Jenna and Heath were swapped out for Jericho and Shane. I think Heroes vs. Villains does suit her as well, or a second chances, because definitely with how she was taken out of the game, it was really heartbreaking. She got injured once. I believe she got injured again, but the second injury was like really brutal. Like, she couldn't even walk. And Australian Survivor did its thing where it's like, all right, even though you're clearly injured, we'll still let you play. Like, but she's obviously such like an easy target at that point. And I think it was just really heartbreaking. Like, I think that's like everyone's worst nightmare going into the show. That you get injured and that's why you get taken out. So I definitely think having Jenna back is definitely great for her. But I definitely agree when it comes to like, you have all these massive names in Australian Survivor and you kind of pick Jenna. Like, I can definitely see why people are like a bit disappointed, but personally, I'm really glad that she gets another shot, and I hope that she does. Amazing.
I need a dose of your positivity. I feel like you're the yin to my yang on this podcast, and you're like balancing me out at this stage. But like, I look at it, if you wanted to bring injured players back, just do what the US did and bring a season out where they had Michael Skupin, Russell Swan, and Jonathan Penner in a season, because all of them got medevac and then they captained their tribes. Why not have Jenna, Nina, and Ross come back to captain different tribes in a season where all these injured players get their second chance? Again, I'm going to be super critical of the cast when it comes to it, because for me, Heroes vs. Villains is the best. This is like, if there's a theme out there that you do want to respect, this is the theme you want to respect. Now, they could still twist this thing. They could make it very exciting by the players that they have there for the relevant country. For Australians who watch sports and things, they might say, these are the villainous players in the Euros, the players you really want to see out here play this game. And that'll be awesome. I don't want to completely shoot it down. They could still go out there and work very hard to make this a very entertaining show. I'll watch the season regardless. But we're here to analyze, we're here to criticize, we're here to look at, what have they done so far for the season based on what we know. Now, let's turn it around a little bit. Who's the biggest snubs? Who are the people that you are shocked not to see here? Now, obviously, we don't know if they were asked or not. There's players that have said in the past that they won't come back, or there's rumors that they're completely disconnected. I mean, both of us will mention Benji as someone we would love to see as a villain. You've mentioned him already a couple of times. But as far as we're aware that, Benji was asked to be on last season on Blood vs. Water, and he said no. So I think he's done with Australian Survivor as far as we're aware.
Yeah, I think he is too, but every season I'll still pray that he just magically shows up on like a Bright Little Pony or something like that, just to completely dominate that season. I think ever since Champions League Contenders, he's definitely one of the biggest, like, quote unquote snakes to ever come back. It was almost on All Stars, but because of work, he had to leave, so they swapped him with Zach. And but I definitely do think that the next time Benji could come back is a full All Star season. Otherwise, he's probably not going to come back at all, unfortunately.
Now, outside of Benji, who else do you think was a big snub? And maybe what we'll do is we'll go season by season here. I'll share my screen with you again and have a look at, we'll look at the first season ever to go out. So, this is the cast that we had. I don't know if it's big enough for you to actually be able to see who we're looking at here. We already have an early boot, obviously, in Craig that came back. Phoebe did return on All Stars. She was someone that potentially I think people would have loved to have seen there. But I think that there is also a fear that we can't have too many of the All Stars cast back here because it'll just be All Stars 2 or second chances for those that didn't end up winning an All Stars. Nick, again, another big character from that season that came back, wasn't All Stars. Jenna obviously now dates Benji, so I feel like that probably influences her decision in regards to if she would ever want to come back and play the game. If you looked at the rest of the cast here, is there anybody I think Al Rowland stands out for me as someone that I could have seen come back as a hero. I don't know if she was asked or if she was interested, but I think if we had to choose one person here that hasn't come back, maybe an Al, maybe a Matt Tarrant, maybe one of those two players would have been interesting to see them come back and play again.
I've always been a massive fan of Connor. Ever since I first watched that season, I've always been wondering, when could Connor ever return? Obviously, he was voted out of what's the tribe? Sanapu. There we go. He was voted out of Sanapu, but they almost went to Rocks for him, like just for a non-elimination as well. And then obviously he made super strong bonds, and Valby just ran out of allies when the merge came, as like Sanapu was just too dominant throughout the rest of the pre-merge. But everything, if Connor was to come back, he could do like really well. But I believe he's not that interested in coming back anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he's that in touch with the Survivor community as far as I'm aware, but I will be honest with you. Like I said, this has been a while since I've watched the season, and I haven't watched the first season twice. The first time was enough for me. It was such a slow season, to be honest. But yeah, interesting. It's always good to share the love with more players that potentially we would love to see come back and play the game. So we had a look. Like I said, you've nominated Connor. I think Al obviously went pretty deep in that first season that she played. She was very closely connected with Lee throughout the season. She was good in challenges. She was good socially, had great relationships with the girls in that season, Brooke and Flick as well. So I'd love to see what she does a second time around going out there. So maybe as someone that went pretty deep, but again, they kind of looked at that and they thought Christy was the person they wanted to bring back. So I get that. You can't have too many of the final threes for each season, and you've got to think about the balance and, do people still want to play the game? That's another thing that needs to be taken into consideration as well. Let's have a look here at the season that is your favorite season. So I'm sure you've got some hot opinions about who you'd like to see back from this season. Obviously, when I looked at this season, I was quite shocked to realize that they've got no one from this season coming back. Was it a bit of a snub?
It's a massive snub. Season 2 is definitely one of the greatest casts. Like, I feel like in all Survivor as well. The fact that the first episode was almost a rock draw thanks to Luke. In the second episode, someone who was on the very bottom just scraped by, and the whole empire of Adam just came crumbling down. And the fact that the final 9 was literally a 3-2 vote just really proves us how amazing the season really is. And I feel like if you were to pick one person from the season who was definitely a massive snub, is Henry. I feel like Henry is definitely one of the biggest villains in Australian Survivor. He was cut way too short in All Stars, just had a really bad run. And I feel like if like Heroes and Villains would have been a perfect season for him to come back. Like he did well the first time, not so great the second time. And I feel like if he was to come back, he might actually do extremely well on the third time.
Yeah, I think that you know, him not coming back, and I feel like he needs that redemption. You know, I kind of look at him as Malcolm the same way now, with Malcolm going out early in Game Changers, and I've always said I want to see Malcolm come back and play again, and you know, rectify the wrongs, you know, of going out so early, because he's a good player. I think that Henry is a better player. He's maybe a little bit too confident in his own ability at times, so if he can rein that in a little bit, I think he'll be a better player, because he definitely has the mind for the game. But yeah, I agree with you. Big snub. Possibly should have come back, I think, in a season such as this as a potential villain. And when you look at the rest of the season here, you've obviously already had Jericho come back. I think the biggest snub of the season not to come back is Luke Toki. We don't know Luke Toki's personal situation. Like I said earlier, I have it under good authority he's not on the Challenge Australia. Not that he didn't tell me that. I've got an idea of who the players are that are going to be on that season, and he's not one of them. So I'm very shocked. Firstly, that he's firstly shocked he's not on the Challenge Australia, because I thought him and David Gannett would be locks. And then secondly, I'm shocked that that he's not on this season and why he's not on. So he's probably the biggest snub. So if we had to pick two players, but I feel like that's too easy of a player, two players to pick here. Yeah. The other player that I've always had a very, very high opinion on, but probably she doesn't fit the theme. But then again, they made Jenna come back for this show. So this is where I'm going to be critical. You know, you've got Jenna coming back as a hero. Why not bring back someone like a Sarah Talike as a hero in a season such as this? Because she's someone, I don't know if she like, I've heard that for All Stars she couldn't do it, right? So it could be again a case of maybe there's some things going on behind the scenes that we don't know about. She can't come back, but I feel like Sarah Talike is probably someone that I'd like to give some, you know, definitely give us some airtime. I'd love to see her back on the show.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I feel like Sarah's definitely one of the greatest players like to ever play the game as well. She literally got blamed for Luke's actions
and she tried to get away from him the whole game, and Jericho kept her at bay.
yeah, exactly. She couldn't quite escape Luke and Jericho's shenanigans. But yeah, I'd love to see Sarah come and play again. And I feel like if she was to come back, she's definitely another strong winner pick as well.
She was only 22. She was 22 when she played the first time. So can you imagine like now coming back at what, 28, 29? She's going to be so much more mature.
Exactly.
Not that she wasn't back then, but I think like she would be less likely to put up with beers.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I feel like she would start her game right as she started to like separate from Luke as well during that massive like mutiny episode. I feel like she would definitely be much more stronger strategically as well, and not as afraid to really push her opinion earlier on as well. But yeah, definitely a massive snub not bringing back Sarah yet.
All right, so let's have a look at the first champions versus contenders season. Obviously, we've got a few players coming back from this season, but overall, we spoke a little bit about Bailey as someone that we'd love to see come back. I don't think we need to go back into that at all because it's well documented. Another person that this is when I was thinking about, you know, Shawnee's coming back. We're seeing Shawnee for a third time. We haven't seen Fenella back, and she's the other part of, you know, that alliance. She was a lot of fun to watch the first time she played. She's got a lot of promise. I personally would have given Fenella the chance to come back in a Heroes versus Villains season such as this instead of Shawnee. I feel like we should have seen her by now again. Yeah,
absolutely. I have noticed, because I follow Fenella on Instagram, I have noticed that every time there's potential for like a returning cast, like I know right before All Star she became pregnant, and I think quite recently she just had like a baby as well.
Yeah. Well, congratulations. Oh no, for us Survivor fans, but congratulations, Fenella, for having another child. You know, and putting yourself ahead of the fans. I understand.
Yeah, but I think definitely both Fenella and Sarah are massive locks to come back when both of them are like really keen to come back as well. It's just a matter of when, I think, for both Fenella and Sarah.
All right, so tell me, who else from this season that is not coming back are you sort of surprised not to see? Obviously, we've got Shani and Matt from this season coming back, as well as Jenna, so a bit of representation for this season already. Is there anybody else here that you're like shocked not to see in a tribe such as this? I feel like with some of these extra people that we're mentioning here, we could have already maybe had a full Heroes versus Villains cast, just putting it out there.
Exactly. Well, another one of my favorite contestants of Champions League Contenders is Benji's #1 rival in Tegan. I feel like she's definitely playing a really strong game. But I feel like where her game started to go downhill a lot was how she reacted to getting blindsided. I feel like definitely her game started going like further and further down after that, despite still having like a lot of like power and control over the Contenders tribe. And I'd love to see her come back and play again. I feel like she's a dark horse on what she could actually do, like on a return. Yeah.
Yeah, I can see it. I mean, early on, she had a lot of power, obviously being in the power couple with Heath that season, I believe it was.
Yeah.
And then that's kind of what made Benji turn against her and the power couple and trying to bring that down, which ultimately he managed to do. But I think that in another season where you don't have someone of Benji's skill level, and now that she's a little bit more aware of what the game is and how it's played, I do think she's got a lot of potential. So I can see her as someone that definitely potentially in the future can come back. And again, it just shows you that there are some good casting choices still out there on the table. I think that, since we're going so wide with who we're bringing back into some of these seasons, and we've got different people coming back, if we're going to have a Jenna come back, I would have leaned into Steve personally. If we're going to bring back a character from that season, I love Steve Cal. Like he was an amazing character. He seemed to also understand the game really well, and I feel like he probably got stereotyped very hard in the beginning and sort of got on the outside of the numbers because of that, and ended up going home a lot earlier than what we as fans would have liked to have seen. He's probably the George archetype, and like one of those earlier George archetypes that we had on the show. But I think that if you're looking for a big character and you're gonna go to some of these early boots like Australian Survivor has done, like I'm a bit shocked that they haven't gone back to him yet.
Yeah, I was just about to bring up Steve as well. I feel like he's like a smaller level to George. He was obviously willing to play hard, like straight off the bat. He was searching for like supplies for an idol. He was running up and down the beach, like trying to find idols and make random alliances here and there. But I felt like once he found his footing, like obviously with like the other alpha males, if it just wasn't for his past reputation that he already made, he probably does go quite deep that season. Because why else would you really target him when you've got like Zach, like Robbie and Benji all there as well? So
yeah, or if he played in a season like Australian Survivor Now, I think Australian Survivor Now suits him because you could get voted out and you could go to the other tribe. You could have an advantage given to you, or not given, but you could find an advantage that could send half of the tribe back to camp and the other half has to vote someone out. There's so many different twists to the game now that could benefit a player such as Steve. Like I feel like Steve likes chaos. He loves moving fast. The game is a lot faster now than what it was when he played it. So I think he could be a person that would be a lot of fun to watch. Is there anybody else here from this tribe or from the season before we move on that you'd like to see come back?
I feel like Brian. I've always been like a fan of Brian in Champions League Contenders. I know that there's been some like controversy around him. I believe he's gone to like prison as well at one point. Yeah, but this was like around All Stars, I believe he went to prison. I'm not too sure what the full story is there, but I quite like him. I quite like Brian. How even though he wasn't
this fits your theme, by the way. If we're gonna go get people from prison to be in the Villains tribe, then they might as well just go and get Brian, get him out, bring Danny in to take care of him out on the island, and we should have a good season.
The preseason rivals, Danny versus Brian. Brian has escaped prison. Who's gonna put him back in the cell? But I feel
convicts versus veterans or something like that next season for Australian Survivor.
Exactly. No, but I feel like Brian could do well on a return as well. I feel like when it comes to like strategic players after Benji had left, him, Sean, and Shawnee were like the last three standing, really. And even though he didn't make the best moves at times, he was still really entertaining like throughout that season as well.
And also is the joint record holder for most immunity wins in a season at 4 immunity wins, individual immunity wins.
Right.
So yeah, he definitely has a resume. I don't know about what happened legally, so can't speak to that. But just based on what we saw, I think he's another person that, I wouldn't disagree with you that based on what he did in the game, the body of work of him in Australian Survivor, he probably warrants a return as well. Okay, let's have a look here going into Champions versus Contenders 2. This is the season that, is my favorite season. I loved watching the season. I'm going to quickly talk about a few people here that we potentially could see back in the future or who I'd love to see back. We're bringing back injured players. Ross is someone that, for me from that season is a massively awesome character to watch. He's fun. He's like this big kid, that wants to do devious things, wants to blindside. I don't know how well he understood the game, but when it comes to a character, he was a great person to watch. I just hated how he went out in the game. And I know we probably will never see him play again because there has been ongoing legal battles, I believe, between Australian Survivor and him when he got injured. So I think that's probably one of the reasons why we will be robbed of one of the great characters of Australian Survivor.
Absolutely. And I feel like he also perfectly fits his theme as well, because he's also a hero, but he's also like a villain because he's like ready to shake things up just for fun. He's willing to steal bananas to prove like trust with Luke. Like, he's definitely a great character. I love Ross so much. But it's definitely a massive snub that he probably won't ever come back, unfortunately. But he would be perfect for the season, in my opinion.
Yeah, so we've also spoken about, someone that I think was a lot of fun in the pre-season. Before we go into Andy. Andy, we've mentioned, I think he would have been a great fit for this season. Obviously, they weren't going to do back-to-back here, and he probably... his body of work on Survivor doesn't really justify a third at this time, which is a shame because I think he's more capable than his placement in the previous season. But, Matt's someone that I know that every time I talk to Dirty Harry, he talks highly of Matt and the things that he did in the game that we didn't get to see on TV. Apparently, he was a lot more strategic and he was a lot more involved behind the scenes, but the edit only focused on his challenges and, banter with the other tribe and talking to them the whole time, the smack talk, really, between them. But I don't think we ever see Matt come back because Matt now is a WWE star over in the US. So, he's earning way more than what Australian Survivor could offer him, even if he did win the season.
Yeah, exactly. I would love to see Matt back personally as well. I feel like kind of how he went out in Champions v Contenders as well is also quite sad to see as well, just how hard both him and Harry fought for that whole entire time. And like, there's nothing that either of them could do. They kept finding idols. They kept trying to like push people to flip, but there's just nothing more Matt could have done.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I'd love to see him, but probably not going to happen. So looking at the rest of the tribe here, we've got Sean, we've got David coming back. Some people may mention John as someone that was a lot of fun to watch. I don't know if we need to see John back again. I don't think he's the greatest strategical player. Daisy, I feel like those two are very much, they're like the male and female version of each other. Like I don't care too much to see either of them. Someone I wouldn't have minded to see come back as a hero potentially would have been Simon. I really enjoyed Simon. He was a bit of a slow burner because he started that game very slow, was in the wrong alliance from the start, didn't really want to make too many big strategical moves. But by the end, you could see that his heart was in the game because he tried everything to stay in the game. He went to look for that idol on the beach for hours and hours when it wasn't even there to be found. I think that if Simon played a second time, he would be a lot more fun to watch. He would understand the game better in the first place because he wasn't a fan coming into it, which didn't help. And I also think that if you're looking at like a hero and you don't have a Lee on a season like this, him or Lee, in my mind, is when I think about heroes or villains, I think that they're a hero, to be honest, to be in a season such as this.
I feel like Simon coming back could live up to Emmett because especially when it came towards the tribe swap and post-merge, Emmett was much more strategic. It was very much like the core of that Brawn Alliance as well. I feel like if Simon was to come back, now that he's played Survivor, he's probably seen a bit more Survivor as well. He would know kind of what it has to take for kind of his archetype. So I feel like if he was to come back, he could definitely do quite well.
I don't think Emmett and Simon are the same archetype for the reason that I think Emmett's a villain. Like if Emmett comes back, he's not a hero. So we're looking at like the Colby Donaldson here. Like he reminds me of that. You know what I mean? So, but in any case, so it's just someone I thought I'd bring up. I wouldn't necessarily mind seeing him again. He wasn't necessarily the most entertaining character that season, but I wouldn't be angry at that. And then for me, the biggest snub here for the season not coming back is Harry Hills. I think again, you couldn't have too many of the All-Stars come back and play back-to-back because it would just be All-Stars 2. But Harry, to me, is a great villain of the game, a fun villain to watch, So, and then also he's a great friend of the podcast. I've become friends with him since the show, so maybe a bit of personal bias in this as well. But I would have loved to have seen Harry.
I'm honestly so devastated that him and Oscar did not come back for Blood versus Water. I feel like that was a big snub for Blood versus Water. But if you're definitely looking at all-star heroes versus villains, Harry's like a massive lock, I believe. But I feel like with what they're trying to do as well, with not having too many all-star villains, I feel like David is more of a stronger villain than Harry. But I would love to see Harry come back in any season. Really.
It's hard to fight. I mean, I think when this season finished, you looked at Harry, Luke, and David as some of the biggest players to play in Australia. But then since then, there's been more players that have come up since then that have sort of, George, for instance, is out there now as well. And it's sort of maybe dropped him down the pecking order a little bit. But definitely someone that I want to see play the game again. Maybe it's a good thing he's not playing on this because we can now have him on a Worlds Collide season where he goes up against other franchises in the future. They're leaving him for something else. Is there anybody else here on this season? Like, I mean, you could easily, if we had to talk about women, for me, both Janine and Abby, Janine probably would be someone that I don't think we get to see her ever again because she's just... Yeah. They probably can't afford to have her out there. She would lose too much money not running her businesses. But, Janine is the godmother, and she's a great villainess. She could be a hero or villain, depending on how you look at it. But I would love to see Janine in any future season.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I feel like Janine is one of those players where she has so much potential to win the game. I feel like pre-merge, just like in Champions League Contenders, she's always going to struggle. But once she's found that core dominant alliance, she'll easily sail through merge, and she can easily play one of the most dominant games like ever. I feel like if she didn't have the likes of Harry and Luke on her season, she hands down wins that season. But I feel like the fact that what's so special about Champions League Contenders is that we had amazing players like Luke and Harry and David who were willing to shake things up. Just to shake things up for the sake of it. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think, again, it would have been great to see her on this season. It's not going to be. And then I do want to talk. I think Abby is a better player than what people think she is. I do think that, a lot of people look at her and think that she's maybe only this physical threat. But let's not forget she was a part of that female alliance, three-person female alliance that dominated a lot of the strategic things that happened that season. They got rid of David, for instance. She ultimately couldn't get rid of Luke, but she was willing to flip on her alliance at the right time, which showed that she also strategically thought about her placement in the game and who she could win. And she knew she couldn't win against Janine. I don't think she wanted to sit next to Pierre in the end either. She knew her path was to get rid of those two really big threats ahead of her, who everybody thought made most of the strategical moves. And I think that, if Luke wasn't there, and he wasn't this very savvy return player, she could have found a way to the end. I mean, he was the person who ultimately took her out, won different, things at the right time. And also there was a twist in the game that took her out with the tribal council pass of getting Baden to go back to camp. And that ultimately sent her home in that spot. But I think she's a much more capable player than what people give her credit for. And I think she could have been easily a hero on a season such as this as well.
Absolutely. And I feel like Abby's one of those players who's never going to come into a season with a huge target because she's not like a Janine. She's not like a Luke. She's never going to play like a massive strategic game. She's always going to be like quite physical, like very challenge based. But she also does have that strategic chops as well to help her get through. But I feel like that's not highlighted as much when it comes to her game on Survivor.
That's exactly where you want to be if you are her for a returning season coming back in the future. And then lastly, I do want to talk, and I know we're really talking about a lot of players here. No surprise that this is my favorite season because there are so many great characters. Someone who's also a friend of the podcast, someone I've spoken to quite a few times is Pierre Miranda. And Pierre... she's going to become the only winner not to play twice in Australian Survivor history. All of the other winners after this season, if rumors are true, would have played the game twice, except for Pierre. And we're not talking about the 2 seasons prior to the return. But I also think that this is due to Pierre not wanting to play again. She's told me she would never play Australian Survivor again. That's not what she's interested in. So, she probably wouldn't have been considered. I don't know if there's too much. I would have liked to have seen her back. She is... you know, I really shocked Shannon Gus on my podcast when I told her that Pierre is my favorite winner in Australian Survivor, but she is my favorite winner in Australian Survivor.
Yeah.
So why would I not want to see her play again? And I also think if I had to, you know, they're making it, I think Australian Survivor is forcing a two-time winner by having 3 winners in this returnee season, having half of the cast playing for the first time. I think they're really trying to manufacture a two-time winner of their own if they can. But I do think Pierre is someone that I could see win the game twice in a few different scenarios. And the most likely situation we see her come back, she's told me this in the past, and don't take my word for it because, you know, people will say one thing one day, tomorrow they'll think something different, is going to be like if there was a crossover season with other franchises. That's what she would be considering to come back. So maybe we see her in something like that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I feel like Pierre, like, I felt really bad for her when Luke got voted out for the second time, because while it's definitely heartbreaking for everyone, it's the right thing to do. You can never win in a final 2, final 3, even like a final 20. You can't win against Luke. And I know that a lot of the casual audience really bashed her for that as well. I know that because I was watching with my family at the time, who are also casual audiences, and they just hated Pierre so much for doing that. And it's like, even though that is the right thing to do, sometimes, like, no. But no, I feel real bad for Pierre. But I feel like if she was to come back on Australian Survivor season, I think, like, very similar to her first time, she's really going to struggle off the start. But once she's in, she'll go all the way.
In my opinion, her gameplay is so much like I can see similarities to Sandra Diaz-Twine sometimes in how she plays, and I think she's way better than what people even remember because their judgment are clouded by their feelings of her taking out Luke, and Luke is my favorite Australian Survivor player of all time. So I mean, you know, I can understand that. I was gutted when Luke went as well, but I definitely didn't blame her. I don't understand why people think that others should just lie over in the game so that someone else can win. Like, everybody's there for themselves, right, when they play the game. But anyways, I wanted to mention Pierre here is someone I don't think she was even asked, or if she was asked, I don't think she would have said yes to come back based on conversations I've had with her in the past. But let's go into the season that followed. There was All-Stars. We've spoken about most of those players. So we'll go to Brains versus Brawn for the next season here. A pretty solid season with some solid cast choices. We had some great early favorites, like we mentioned earlier. Any of Joey, Shannon, or Simon, I think, would have been great returnees for a season such as this. Is there any of those three that specifically you think that the biggest snub? Because I don't think you would have seen all three of them. Who of the three pre-mergers from that season? Shannon obviously just had a baby. She wouldn't have come back. But Joey and Simon, I guess, who do you think between those two were the biggest snub for this season?
I feel like definitely Simon's the biggest, like, the much more bigger player between them two. But I'm really sad not to see Joey again. I was a massive fan of Joey. I thought everything he was doing on that season was fantastic. Like, how he was able to, like, read the room, he was able to pull away from, like, George, especially, like, his not his number one ally, but very close to his number one ally at the time. But I feel like just his room to read, like, I guess to kind of show off his alliance, really, because it was very obvious who his hierarchy was, who was in the middle, who was at the bottom. But I feel like now, in retrospect, Joey would know how to hide that a bit more. So I feel like if Joey was to come back, he could easily play a dominant game like Luke and David.
Well, it's funny you mentioned Luke and David. You mentioned you're a big Luke fan. A lot of the fans were very critical of Joey in that season because they said he was trying to imitate Luke, you know, when he was talking to the camera, and he was like that same type of energy. But apparently Joey never watched Survivor prior to playing. So he didn't have a clue about the game, he didn't know why people were getting angry at him. He was like, who's this Luke guy that everybody keeps telling me I'm trying to play like, you know? He didn't know who he was. So, and I just found it to be crazy. The Australian Survivor casual fans sometimes, like, I very much struggle with that fan base because they were going hard at him. They were like angry at Emmett for trying to be David Gennard. And I was like, these guys are going out there trying to be entertaining. Like, would you rather have people be wallpaper out there? Like, I mean, Joey did bring us a lot of excitement and entertainment in the early stages. So I wouldn't be angry at him. I can see it between the two of them, though. I probably would take the other approach. And I know you've quite rightfully acknowledged that Simon is the bigger player out of the two, but I think Simon is a pretty big snub for a season such as this. It's a loosely titled heroes versus villains. It's not, you don't have to be the biggest heroes or the biggest villains in the franchise history. It's just be a hero or a villain and you can come back. So in that case, he could have been someone that could have been brought back as a hero or something like that in the season. But I think if he's going to be brought back in the future, most likely we see him in a second chance season. That's one of the I guess themes they haven't used yet. And who else would fit the second chance theme more than someone that was voted out with 2 idols in their pocket? Like I feel like that's really Simon. Like he fits that theme to the T. So not overly shocked he's not back, but sad not to see him come back in this season. Again, someone that I think could have been exciting to watch this season since we've gone back to Jenna, who's an injured player. Sorry, Jenna, I know I keep coming back to you, but you're the player. If I look at casting and I'm like, there's other players out there. I would have brought back someone like a Chelsea who left that season also due to medevac reasons, I believe. Like she was just gone the next day. She was a physical beast in that season. She had some great alliances. From what we could see, it was hard to tell what her game was about at times because the edit, if you weren't George or Haley, wasn't that great for most players out there. But she's someone I wouldn't have minded to see come back. What's your thoughts on potentially for Chelsea? I'm not saying she's one of the biggest snubs, but just if I'm looking at Jenna's spot and I'm like, okay, they wanted to bring an injured female back, then why not bring someone back to actually make the merge?
Yeah, no, it's quite hard for Chelsea because I believe she only got 3 confessionals her entire time. I keep making fun of the fact that her medical evacuation was told by other people, not even herself. It's it's told by Imogen, Danny, and Johnson's like, "Oh, Chelsea's out of the game." Like Chelsea had nothing to really say about it, which is definitely quite sad. But I'd definitely love to see like people like Chelsea, like Jay, and even Samantha from Champions League Contenders come back and actually get a confessional, if you know what I mean. Like it'd definitely be quite cool to see like what exactly was going on with them and like why we never really saw anything. Yeah.
So I just brought it back to sort of into the conversation, not as one of the biggest people, but I'm just thinking like that's another player that injured themselves that could have come back. I could have seen her as a hero. She could have gone back up against Haley. We could have had round 2 for them to get out there and doing some physical stuff against each other. It could have been a built-in rivalry, I guess, between the two of them. But in any case, they didn't go that direction. Someone else here that I think personally is a massive snub, massive snub is Gerald Yules. I think that Gerald, for me, when I look at him, he is that person I would have put in as like the Rupert type of character in a Euros tribe. I think that he kind of really represents, you don't have, like you had John Isto that I said I wouldn't really bring him in. He's like the typical Australian bloke, but I think he could have been that person with a little bit more of a strategic side. I've spoken to him a few times on the podcast. The guy understands the game. He understands strategy. He was very under-edited at times. He knew a lot more about the game and what was going on that was ever shown on the camera. And I could tell by just the conversations we've had. And I think even with that limited edit, people would have remembered him if he came back for a season such as that. So I feel like he's a big snub for me personally.
Oh, absolutely. Gerald was playing an amazing game, but I guess the theme of Brands versus Brawn is that you just got outplayed by George. Like that was pretty much the summary of the season. I feel like that's definitely summary of Gerald's game. Like it was just a moment too short to try and take out George. But yeah, I feel like if Gerald survives that vote, he's definitely got like a case to go all the way, potentially even towards the end in Brands versus Brawn.
And I know Gerald wants to play again. He badly wants to play again. So, like, I feel bad that he didn't get the call for a season such as this to come back and play another time. But I guess when you're looking at it, there's only 3 men in that tribe that are coming back. So he just didn't fit the bill for this season. But I've got a feeling we'll see Gerald in the future again. Like, I'd bet my bottom dollar on it. We're going to see him in a future season again. The person that probably a lot of people, and probably yourself included, would bring up, I'm assuming, is going to be Emmett, a person that, would have been a great villain. But who do you replace, in a season such as this? Who do you replace? Do you replace David Gannat? Do you replace George or Matt? I don't think you can. Oh, well, Matt was the hero. Who was the other villain that we had?
Geordie.
You can't really, right? So, I mean, those 3 are kind of bigger at this stage. But still, another we're saying here you can't replace them, but I think we're proving that you could have had a full heroes versus villains cast probably.
Yeah, absolutely. And people talk about like Lydia or like Brian and being like the challenge piece of Australian Survivor. I feel like Emmett is definitely up there on one of the biggest challenge pieces. He won 3 in a row. An idol was played on him, and he came second in that one random immunity challenge where like 5 out of 9 people could be immune. And I'm pretty sure it was close to winning that final 8 immunity as well before he got taken out.
Yeah, I think I can't remember from the top of my head how many immunities he won. I think he won 3, but I don't think he's actually equal. Actually, he did win 4, so he's equal to the record. The person who's the biggest challenge beast, and we didn't even mention her earlier on. I kind of skimmed over her, but someone that I think would have been a great fit as a hero this season. I don't know why I didn't bring it up as Brooke Jowett. Like, I mean, Brooke is the record holder for most immunities in Australia. She's won 6, so 2 in her original season and then 4 in All Stars against crazy competition. So she's not on, and if you think about it, that's suspicious. Like, why would Brooke not be on a season of Australian Survivor? I'll leave you guys with that thought. As we continue on this podcast, Danny, we've mentioned Danny a few times. I don't know if we need to bring her up as someone that could have come in. She was a big presence in that season. I wouldn't have minded to see her come back and play the game again. I actually think, personally, I was hard on Danny at times for her strategic game that season. Her voting against Simon, when Simon was never going to go against her, I thought just weakened herself at the time she didn't need it. Someone with 2 idols that was willing to play with you. I always joke around the fact that if someone tells you they'll play their idol for you, they won't actually do it. That's not your idol, it's their idol. But I feel like Simon maybe would have been one of those players that would have done it, and I felt like she made the wrong read. But this is a great example of her telling her partner before she went out of the game, my plan is to get the biggest alpha guy, get close to him, become friends with him, and then blindside him. So she had a preempted plan that she felt she had to follow through with when she was in the game that I think put her in a worse position instead of just playing to the situation. But I did enjoy Danny on the season. She was a big presence. I wouldn't have minded to see her back on a season such as this as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. She was definitely a massive part of that season, and she would have been a great villain. It would have been great to have both her and Simon coming back as well. Like, I think
we need that second chances casting. If you're listening an hour and 35 minutes into this podcast, second chances. We need that.
I recall for All Stars, they really hyped up Flick and Brooke, like coming back as this massive rivalry. Like, they could definitely hype that up as well. Like, Danny brutally blindsided Simon. How, like, what's going to happen there? Like, is he going to be like as close to her now, or is he going to try take her out for like old time's sake? So yeah, definitely Danny coming back would be really, really interesting.
All right, so I've kind of went through a lot of people here. Is there anybody else that we've left on the table here of these players that you feel like, there's actually, in hindsight, thinking about Brains versus Brawn, even though the edit at times wasn't great because it just focused so much on George and Haley, it was better than Blood versus Water because there was still a lot of memorable characters that we can look at now and say, man, there's so many of these players. I think this might be the season with the most players that we've mentioned so far that we would have loved to see come back. Is there anybody else?
I do have one pick. Now, this pick, everyone's going to hate me for it. It's like as if I'm forcing people to drink expired chocolate milk with it. But my cheeky hot pick is Benny, the 4th person voted out this season. I don't know why. His 1 episode arc in episode 4 is probably one of the best comedic eras you can ever see on Survivor. And yeah, I feel like he'll be great on a return. I know he's never gonna come back, but I feel like him coming back would be great for like a villain's tribe. Absolutely.
I feel like he was the villain that didn't know he was a villain out on the game. So It would be funny. He would have that classic quote of "I'm a villain. I thought I was coming back as a hero" type of thing if he was out there,
Or maybe he's a Candace.
I don't hate it. Listen, I get it. A lot of people don't like him. A lot of people didn't like how he spoke when he went out, and they didn't really like what he was standing for. But it would have been a fun wild card pick. And I mean, I think another person here as well. And again, I feel like we've almost mentioned the whole cast, which really maybe I should put Brains versus Brawn is my favorite season, but I won't. I'm gonna stay with my favorite. But there's a lot of good characters. We can't deny that. There's obviously Kara. If she was to come back in a future season, she would be entertaining to watch. I think that we will see Kara back in the season at some stage. She didn't get the call this time, but I do think we see her in the future.
The two people that I'm really shocked aren't on the Heroes tribe, but I feel like they definitely would if it was a full All-Star season. It's Kara and Tarzan. Both of them did probably the most heroic moves in Australian Survivor. They sacrificed their
That's
games
right.
for someone else. Yeah.
That's right. I mean, Kara doing that move where she was like, I know, I'm going home. She didn't know she was going to get voted into the other tribe. That was a crazy move. And she got the hero music and everything when it happened, the fallen hero music. And I'm not a guy that gets emotional easily, but Australian Survivor, man, like they sometimes have these moments, seeing George cry, like while she says this, I was like, holy shit, this is like hitting me,
Exactly.
Yeah, true. Yeah, it's sad, but again, you can't have I understand it. Kara, Haley, Flick, and George all in the same season. It's just overkill, especially the three of them were so close as well. So I get it.
Brains vs. Brawn is definitely a season where if you were to just do like a random returning season, just replay Brains vs. Brawn. Because almost
they had a good cast.
Yeah, like almost everyone on that cast is just fantastic.
All right, so let's get into last season. So obviously fresh in our minds. And I think probably the same thing is happening with Brains vs. Brawn, where in the moment I was like, everybody was super high on it. Like, especially when it hit Paramount Plus over in the US, people were talking highly of the season. Suddenly Australian Survivor is like the best thing since sliced cheese and everybody wants to see it everywhere. And I was just like, I didn't think the edit was the greatest and I didn't like all the twists. So I was kind of like put off a little bit by it. But now that I've had some time for it to sink in, going back over that cast, I have to admit it's a very good cast. Now, this one, we don't have that, benefit of having had in a year or a while for it to sink in. So we've got to think about it pretty freshly here. They've brought back from this season, obviously, Nina, and they've brought back Geordie, two players that I'm not surprised seeing them come back here. Who did they miss out on? Who's the biggest snubs for this season?
I felt obviously like Samantha. Sam, just definitely a massive snub as well from returning. Definitely one of the biggest villains currently in Australian Survivor, stealing Jesse's idol and blindsiding him with that. But I feel like it's kind of the same thing as Pierre, where when Samantha made that villainous move, everyone just hated her for it. And for the whole time while she was in the game, everyone was publicly, like, probably messaging her horrible things, but always posting and commenting horrible things about her. So I definitely understand why Samantha wouldn't come back so soon.
Yeah, I'm like, honestly, the treatment of Samantha, I've said it a few times on this podcast, almost made me want to quit watching Australian Survivor. It was that bad. Like I just thought to myself, it's like, how can people take this game to that level where it is a game about deception? It's really what the game's about. But it just shows you how the casual fan in Australia just don't get that. Like, no, she's a bad person in real life. This is how she is. She lies, backstabs, and steals from people in real life. Like, how can you not make that distinction between real life and the game? I just couldn't understand it. And, Samantha is a very nice person. Like, I communicated with her maybe like once or twice prior to her going out and playing when Brains vs. Brawn was on, where she potentially would have been on my podcast. I couldn't make it. Like, sadly, she ended up pulling out at the end, and I don't blame her for it because then I found out she was going to go on to a season. So she probably didn't want to get on the podcast and let people think or understand how she thinks about the game before she goes out and plays it. But she was nothing but nice when she didn't need to be. I was a very small podcast at the time, didn't have many followers. I still am a small podcast, but again, both her and her husband, nicest people from what I can get. So that really pissed me off, to be honest, to see how people treated her, because I know that that's not her, and I want her to be proud of what she did, because that is the dead grandma lie that Johnny Fairplay did for Australian Survivor. People are going to remember it 10 years from now and 15 years from now, and I hope that at some point she feels, and she probably does, but I do know that it affected her. You could just see by how she had to hit back on social media and things like that. So she definitely said no. Even if they asked her, she wouldn't have come back. It's too soon. I do think we get to see her. I'll make a bold call in the future, because Mark, who I have had on the podcast, who I have spoken to, he has said to me that he will try and push her. You obviously can't push her if she doesn't want to do it, but he's like, he wants to encourage her to play the game again, which is good, that he wants to support her in that move. So I agree with you. Biggest villain, biggest snub. Looking at someone that I can understand why they're not on the season.
Yeah.
But I think that they were the best player of the season outside of Mark, and it's Josh Mulgate. I think Josh is someone that was severely under-edited at times on the show, and it actually made for a worse product when it came to the end game, because when it came to the end game, if he had a very good winner's edit similar to Mark, we would have been guessing until Final Four. Wow, who's going to win this?
Yeah.
Who's going to get into the Final Three? And then,
one of them would have...
Exactly. There would have been like excitement until the end, but we knew he didn't have enough edit. Yeah. They didn't show enough of his control of the game. And whenever you talk to people, everybody is high on this guy's game now. And I think the fact that he was so severely under-edited can play in his benefit if he does come back in a returnee season where people just don't know how good he is. And to me, when the season ended, I said he would be a hero coming back. I see him as a hero type of archetype in the game. But he's just had I think it's a son. I'm not too sure, but they've had their first child. So obviously priorities wouldn't have said yes, even if they did ask. But I know he would be open to a future season. So I do hope we get to see him in a second chance season.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to see Josh play again. I think it was, from episode 1 to like episode 8 when Amy got voted out or something. Like he had no confessionals. He just had one small voiceover like of 3 lines. So definitely Australian Survivor is very unfortunate when it comes to like the edit. But yeah, if Josh was to come back, it would definitely be a very powerful force once again.
Yeah. Looking back at this season, going to get handed over to you again. Let's keep it to 2 more players. I know I feel like there's so many we could bring up that could come back on a season such as this, which again proves why they should have done a complete all-star season in my mind. I don't care if they have to bring more players back from some of these shows. But who else do you think, if you had to choose people here that are big snubs or the biggest snubs?
I said the biggest snubs is definitely Khan and Amy. I feel like that.
So if you could choose one, one of the 2.
Khan is definitely like the biggest character, but I feel like Amy is probably like the better player between both of them. I feel like Amy just got super unfortunate with the tribe swap. I think with Sandra leaving, I'm pretty sure she told like all the alpha men that like they have to stick together or something like that right as she was leaving, and so that kind of forced her to be on the bottom because like both Mark, Josh, Geordie, like Juicy Dave, Jordan were always going to stick together. So I feel like if Amy was to come back, she'll definitely play an amazing game, and I feel like could go a lot further.
Yeah, so having had interviews with some of the cast members from that season on my podcast, a few of them said that she overplayed. So I don't know if she's a better player than Khan, to be honest, to be fair. From the conversations I've had, they're both great choices. I would like to see both of them come back as well. But from what I've been told, that if she didn't turn her back against Jordan, she would have taken one of the twins' spot, probably would have made it to the merge. So she played herself out of that game because Jordan wanted to work with her from the start. That's why he told her that votes were going to come her way. She overplayed her hand too soon. But I would much rather have someone like that who's willing to play the game than someone who sits back like the twins that, according to the edit, they probably did a lot more than what we saw, but the edit didn't really show it. So I don't hate that choice. I do like her as well. But if I had to go between the 2 of them, I would say Khan for me is probably the biggest character and villain from that season. So I'd like to see him come back. I think he had a good strategic game. He had a good social game. If it wasn't for Mark, he gets past that point. And Mark, just because of his experience, convincing Sam, he had Sam to a certain degree wrapped around his finger, where Sam wanted to work with him. You know what I mean? Yeah. So his downfall wasn't that he was a bad strategic player or that he was playing too big. He definitely had at times too much confidence in himself, but it was insane that he could hang on to the idol as long as he did without playing it. It was absolutely insane. His read was right every single time. But the biggest problem he had was that Mark saw him and took him out. But that was because Mark is a great player and he recognized another great player in Khan. So I think that he would have been a great addition to a season such as this. Without going into too much detail of other people from this cast that could have been good returnees, Chrissy was a lot of fun to watch from the season. I don't think she comes back anytime soon. I'm not sure if she ever wants to come back. From conversations I've had, she seemed really burned by the casual fan reception, didn't realize what was going to hurt her. I think that Jesse could be a lot of fun in the future, and I think he's a very capable player, so I wouldn't mind seeing him come back. Croc was fun to watch. I enjoyed him. He was one of the few people who wanted to turn against the likes of Jesse and Sam and dictate his own future in the game. So again, he was willing to make moves. So I respected that. Obviously, Andy, we've spoken about a lot. Brianna, I would love to see come back in a second chance season. Yeah. She is a very kind person who I've spoken to a few times. She's been on the podcast. She is very much, she's a super fan. For her to go out that early was devastating. And I think that she has a big game in her. It just didn't manifest in that game. But yeah, so many good choices overall here. And I just wanted to give love to a few more players. But I think that's kind of it for who we potentially could have seen on a season. I think one thing we proved here, Michael, is we could have done a full heroes versus villains season, right? If casting wanted to, there's enough people out there now. We don't know if some of these people may have said no if they were asked. But in hindsight, I know you're going to be happy just to have Survivor back. You're going to be happy to have heroes versus villains because it's a great theme. Exactly, but in hindsight, now that we've gone through the names, do you feel like Australian Survivor has missed the mark here a little bit? And they should have potentially gone with a full returning season?
Absolutely. And I do agree with you strongly that Heroes versus Villains is one of those very few themed seasons that has to be for like a full returning season. You can't do half and half. You can't do fans versus favorites. I feel like Heroes versus Villains, Game Changers, All Stars, you definitely can't do those seasons with half returning, half newbies. It has to be full returning players. So I definitely do think Australian Survivor did really snub on that, but you also do have to think who said no, who could have realistically gone back. Because I do think one of the trouble with All Stars is that while they did get a lot of really great names, there were a few people who definitely did say no, a Benji, a Sarah, a Janine, a Pierre, who they obviously couldn't bring back with them. So who do kind of swap out then? And maybe a lot of the big players who were heroes and villains said no, so they couldn't go with a full a full thing. Yeah.
Like I said, mate, you're the yin to my yang on the channel. You're definitely bringing a little bit of stability when I'm just ready to rip in. But, overall, we're going to be watching the season. We're going to have a lot of fun with it. I've had a lot of fun chatting to you here on the podcast. For those of you that have seen Michael for the first time, you will see him in future podcasts as well, where we will be talking about Australian Survivor, maybe a few guest appearances on other themes and other Survivor seasons as well. Michael, it's been great to have you here today with us on the channel as well. So people who are listening to this at this point, please consider subscribing to the channel for more content. Put a like on the video, comment below. Who do you agree and disagree on with some of the players that we've mentioned that we would have liked to have seen on the show? Who do you think is, do you disagree with me? Is Jenna a great pick? And again, Jenna, if you're listening to this, go out there and prove me wrong. I'm more than happy to be proven wrong. I think you've probably got that capability to go out there and do it. So it's no hatred, nothing like that. I'm just talking about what I've seen on the show to date. And I would love to be proven wrong when it comes to that. But consider subscribing to the channel. Michael, it's been fun. We'll catch up at some stage and do this again.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it, mate. Keep positive like COVID.
Oh, well, there we go. Lost monetization on this podcast. Luckily, I can't monetize yet, so we're fine. All right, guys. Catch you next time.